My name is Brian McGowan. I'm an Extension Wildlife Specialist in the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources at Purdue. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the graduate extension work we've been doing in our department recently. My colleague Rod Williams is going to also give a separate presentation found on the same website on our undergraduate extension work. So in looking at a graduate student curriculum in higher education, there's certainly a need to train them on public communication, given that as scientists we have a much higher obligation to communicate to citizens about what we do, why it's important, and how the work that we do here on campus and throughout the communities really improves society. And if you think about it, land-grant institutions are really well positioned to do that given our role in extension, research, and teaching. It's a really good fit, and so we've looked at that internally within our department. So several years ago we surveyed our graduate students asking them about extension, communication, and what they thought was important regarding their time with us here at Purdue. And so we asked them to rate on a scale of 1 to 5 the level of importance in terms of being able to communicate with non-scientific audiences, the importance of sharing findings with non-scientific audiences, whether or not they understood extension, and if they're familiar with the logic model. And so while you can see from this they really thought it was important to communicate with non-scientific audiences, being able to do so and share findings, they didn't certainly understand extension, how extension could do that, and they certainly weren't very familiar with the logic model and how that fit within all this. And so we looked at that as kind of a need as well as an opportunity to formalize extension within our graduate curriculum within FNR. And so as a department, what we wanted to do was gathered a group together to try and develop a policy that we can have in our department for integrating extension within our graduate curriculum. So in 2009, we got a group together to look at this, and we looked around other institutions and we found that Michigan State had a model that we were looking at to adopt. But within our group, what we really wanted to do was maintain flexibility within required credit hours. We didn't want to overburden students to take a lot of extra courses and limit their participation in other coursework. Second, we wanted to give academic freedom for faculty. We really thought that was important. So we really didn't want to dictate what students specifically had to do to meet that extension requirement. And third, we really wanted to give students credit. Okay? So if they're going to do work, we really wanted them to be able to have something on their transcript, have something official, and so it's kind of a win-win situation from that. So after that, we developed a course, The Theory and Application of Natural Resources and Extension. I co-instruct that with Rod Williams, and so it's a 1 credit hour half semester course, and so it meets 8 times during the semester, and we have students take it within their first 2 semesters. So by then they should have a good understanding of what their research project is going to be, and then that would dovetail hopefully within their extension deliverable that they identify within our course. And so some of the things we teach about extension, the history and purpose, and also use and application of the logic model. As the previous slide showed a couple slides ago, they really don't have a good understanding of either of those. But the bulk of the course really focuses on communication and developing a plan that leads to that deliverable. And so we have students do elevator speeches where we describe it as they are talking to their uncle or grandma or neighbor, and within a minute or so that they have to tell them what they're doing with their graduate research, but more importantly, why it's important and why they should care. Okay? And so students are typically really good at describing what they do, but sometimes they have difficulty linking that to why it's important. You know, why is it important to save, research endangered species, or why is it important to study how forests, work, those kinds of things. We also cover extension portals and deliverables, and so we want students to have a firm understanding of the types of extension deliverables that are possible, and groups and agencies and things that extension cooperate with, and how they can maybe tie into some of those portals. An extension plan critique. So not only do students have to develop an extension plan, they've got to critique their peers' extension plan, and that's an anonymous critique. Very similar to what you would do with journal articles and things where you would do an anonymous review, and we have a rubric that they complete when they do that. We do cover program evaluation, and so while we don't necessarily require that within our policy, we feel like they should have a firm understanding of evaluation, because if you're planning An extension program, it really goes hand in hand with the evaluation because you have to have an understanding of what the issue is, what you're trying to achieve with your program. And then we have them do presentations, and so that's kind of the last part of the course. And so through the progression, they understand extension and the logic model, they develop a logic model, that's the outline for their extension plan which they develop, they critique each other's extension plan, they do the presentations, they critique each other's presentations, and so again we really try and put the onus on them to not only develop their communication skills but evaluate each other. So not only do we have them develop a lot of these communication skills throughout the course, but by having them critique their peers' products, it really kind of helps them have a better understanding of what works and what doesn't work in terms of communicating with non-scientific audiences. So this is our policy the way it currently stands. This is available on our FNR policy manual. We do have it linked from our Extension grad website, which I'll show you at the conclusion of the program. But basically, again, that course which is required, we also require them to have a logic model, and we require them to have an extension plan. So really you can see by taking the course, they walk out of that course with the other two requirements there. So the only thing they have to do after they leave our course is to produce their extension deliverable. And if you read in the policy, this is really defined quite broadly. It could be a number of different things, and that is intentional because, again, we wanted to maintain academic freedom for faculty, and we just wanted to be very open-minded about the types of things that students would do. We did not initially, we had different numbers. We had 1 for master's and 2 for PhD students. We decided to change that to 1. That was the most recent policy revision. And the analogy would be that the students, master's students and PhD students, they produce 1 thesis or 1 dissertation, but certainly the breadth and scope of those are different. And so similarly with their extension deliverable, they would each produce 1 deliverable, but we would certainly expect those to be different in terms of scope and breadth and that kind of a thing. An important part of the policy is we track it, and so at students' defense there's a form that they print online and fill out what their extension deliverables are. They take that when they defend, give their oral defense at the conclusion of their time here, and then their committee signs off on that. And then that's turned into the graduate office. It's also turned in to the extension coordinator as well, so we can track the number of deliverables over time. A lot of the benefits of adopting the model, and so we've certainly realized some of this within FNR. Number one, it certainly increases understanding of extension. And again, I think having that formalized structure is key. There's a lot of work done by faculty, not only within Purdue, but in other institutions. They do a really good job of integrating students with extension that they do. But the problem is once they go on, then that's lost, okay? So you lose that. Where if it's a formalized structure as faculty come and go, you get that common kind of a thing going, and so we really view that as a benefit in terms of integrating extension. Secondly, improve communication skills, and so we really, again, stress that within the class. And again, I think our students do a really good job of going to professional meetings and integrating with those kind of groups, but we haven't done as good a job in giving them opportunities to give presentations and communicate with non-scientific audiences. So this definitely can increase their communication skills. Thirdly, I think it can increase their marketability. And so when you look at careers out there now, both within higher education, but also with non-government organizations, government agencies, there's an increased demand for people with good communication and leadership skills, and so this can really help fill that. And again, it's something that it's documented, they get credit for it, and so it really kind of helps their marketability from that standpoint. Fourth, it really is important in terms of linking the teaching side of it, the research side of it, and extension personnel and students, right? So it becomes a more cohesive program within our department instead of having these little kind of parts that are operating independently and not necessarily communicating on a regular basis. And so that's an important part of it. And I think a really direct outcome of a lot of these things is the last thing, it increases visibility of extension. Okay, so when students come to universities, obviously they are all exposed to the teaching mission of the land-grant universities. Graduate students do research, and so they're exposed to that part of it. But they don't really get formally exposed to extension, so because of that they don't really understand what extension is, and they don't have that exposure. And so this has really been beneficial in increasing extension, not only within our department, but we think within the college as well. Some challenges that we've kind of been faced with as we've progressed over the last several years with this is first is that some graduate student research projects really have limited extension outlets. As I mentioned before, our graduate program is quite diverse, and so while some things that fit very well within traditional extension outlets, other things like perhaps genetics, those types of things, sometimes we struggle with that. And so while we always try to help students identify an outlet, a project that really fits within their graduate program, doesn't always work. Secondly, you get variable student support by faculty advisors. Okay? And so part of that stems from the fact that most of our faculty aren't involved in extension. They certainly don't have direct formal training in extension. So just in talking with some of them and just getting some feedback, some of them find it very difficult to advise students in developing their extension deliverable. Okay? And that's definitely a challenge. In our department, we have much more FTEs in teaching and research than we do in extension. But that's where it really leads to that third challenge, is that you really need a team of extension people within the department to support this. And so when students are having trouble identifying an appropriate outlet or having questions about their project, we need extension people within the department that can provide them some guidance that maybe that their faculty advisor just isn't trained to do so. So our contact information is here. It's also available on the website as well. I just want to direct you to the website that's linked here. It has a lot of information on here. So again, a lot of what I've talked about in here is on the website. In fact, this very presentation is located on this website off of YouTube. But we've got a link to our policy manual online that's linked directly to the graduate requirement for extension. We also have a section on our course. And so I briefly described our course. You can find in more detail, the syllabus is linked on there. But we also have a link to a student example, a student logic model, extension plan, and presentation. And so Emily McCallan is a graduate student in our department. And so this provides not only an example of people that want to know kind of what we're doing from a standpoint of the So this provides our students a really good example of what a good logic model is, what that would look like as an extension plan, and then what that would look like as an oral presentation. And so it kind of provides students a good example from that standpoint, but also provides people just an idea of kind of what we're doing with the class as well. Another section on the website is student deliverables. As I mentioned before, that's a really important part of our policy. And we really track that because we want to see what kind of difference we're making. Are we increasing our extension capacity, those kinds of things. And so I've got some examples listed on there for some recent graduate students, but there's also a link to a complete list on there. So you can go by year to the graduate student and it lists what their deliverable was, it lists their major professor, and it has that information on there as well. And again, that's a living document that will just increase over time as we progress. We also have some feedback on the policy. So an important part of this is, what do the students think? And so we certainly ask them some things on our course evaluation every year, but that doesn't necessarily gain us feedback on the policy itself. And so every graduate student has an exit interview with a department head, and he has a couple questions relating to our graduate policy. And so we've got some information on here how students find that it benefits them. And then lastly, we've got a link to a page that has resources for current FNR graduate students. So it links to our reporting form. We've got some examples on how to fill out that form. Again, it would be very analogous to how they would list things on a CV. We've also got a potential outlets guide. And so one of the problems that students face is they don't have a firm understanding of what some potential outlets are that they could publish or they can give a presentation. And so, for example, in the publications and newsletters section here, the Indiana Woodland Steward. So we've got information about what the organization is, what kind of topics that they publish, what are the length of the articles. We've got information on who the audience and the distribution list is. We've got a contact person who they would send those to, deadlines for issues, what the procedure is, so on and so forth. So it really takes the mystery out of how students can get hooked, linked in with some of these outlets. And then lastly, we've got some other helpful publications and resources on extension available at the bottom of the website relating to extension itself, the logic model, program planning, those types of things. So that's our program in a nutshell. Again, my contact information as well as Rod Williams' contact information is on the web page. If you have any questions about what we're doing with graduate extension and FNR or undergraduate extension, feel free to contact either one of us. Thanks.